Welcome back to Truth to Tell. I'm Michelle Ali-Murati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll, and it's good to be back for a while, at least. Thanks to my colleagues.
Glad to have you back, Andy. Can I just say, I'm glad to have you back.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. Now on to our main topic, the massive and growing trend in economic inequality everyone seems to be talking about. At the moment, doing little to alleviate.
Remember, you can give us your questions and comments on our topic today by giving us a call at 612-341-0980, 612-341-0980, or you can tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll, or post your questions and comments on Truth to Tell's Facebook page. That's facebook.com/TruthToTell. And remember, we're also live streaming video today and pretty much every week now at livestream.com/TruthToTellMN. And we've just posted that on our Facebook page as well, so you can get that link directly there.
Outstanding.
Livestream.com/TruthToTellMN.
Years ago, surveys showed that some of the poorest among us were convinced by marketers and pundits that they were among the top 20 or 30 of wealth owners, even as they were losing ground in real income, losing their health and pension benefits, being laid off. It's in record numbers to watch as their jobs went offshore with no penalties attached, and actually rewarded with tax breaks. And older workers scrounging for even part-time jobs, paying minimum and not living wages with no benefits. It's in the nature of our culture now that people need to believe themselves better off than those people, in quotes, suffering poverty or near poverty living conditions, not relating to them really. And so that's a big part of this in some cases. Watching their fewer and fewer dollars lose ground to inflation, real income it's called, and reducing the value of their money while paying out higher and higher costs for health care, food, among other goods and services.
And yet that psychological trap is killing us. New studies are not only attach all these dynamics to some serious supporting data, but they warn us about the pending disasters that could well occur if such continued economic equality sticks with us.
Inequality.
Inequality, sorry, not equality. Sort of the opposite of what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. One of them is growth injustices, showing the serious dimensions of the issue. The widening economic inequality in Minnesota, causes, effects, and a proposal for estimating its impact in policymaking. As its authors write, long-established poverty measures tell us about the bottom of income distribution. For a family of 2 adults and 2 children, the household income level that determines whether they live in poverty was computed at $22,811 in 2011. That year, the number of Americans living below this cutoff, that's the dollar amount varies according to family size and makeup, reached about 46.2 million. That's 15%. And that's up from 33 million in 2001. And the sheer scale of economic disadvantage in the world's richest nation can be difficult to comprehend. And it goes on. And we'll learn more about this hour.
Another study analyzed by the Star Tribune editorial board points to the very real role that increasing poverty is doing to disrupt society and threaten massive divisions as the rich get richer and the poor can no longer focus their attention on anything but survival. Scarcity, why having too little means so much, by Harvard economist Sendhil Mullainathan and Princeton psychologist Eldar Shafir. At any cost, it is in the nature of all animals that survival comes first.
And will policymakers stop pandering to the self-deception and start putting the singular effort needed to turn these trends around before the complete collapse of the economy and descent into chaos? The numbers are there, and sometimes in the driest of terms, but serious numbers nonetheless. Moreover, the scarcity study reveals the paralysis of those in poverty to focus their decision-making in favor of improving themselves and making better choices for their behavior. How can anything go well for people whose cognitive functions are seriously, perhaps fatally, impaired by their poverty?
Well, we'll try to get to the bottom of some of this growing phenomenon with this week's guests.
And we have with us first today Thomas Legg, and he is a professor of finance at Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, a researcher and co-author of the aforementioned Growth and Justice Report, widening economic inequality in Minnesota, causes, effects, and a proposal for estimating its impact in policymaking. Yes, it is a tongue twister, but it is a very appropriate title. Professor Legg, welcome to you. Glad to have you on today.
Well, thank you, and very happy to have an opportunity to tell our story.
That's good. Brianna Halverson is on the front lines of the effort to address working middle-class Minnesotans in her job as director of the Minnesota branch of Working America, an AFL-CIO program. Ms. Halverson, welcome to you.
Welcome. Thanks for letting me be here today.
And we also have with us, always glad to have with us, our resident political scientist, Tom O'Connell. He's a PhD and a professor emeritus of political science studies, I should say. Right?
I like to use the word studies in
political
science.
Studies? Okay. Political studies, so we'll go with that at Metropolitan State University. Just had your retirement party for Metro State yesterday.
Say he's emeritus now.
Yeah, officially emeritus.
That just means old professor.
That's right, yeah.
And you'll continue to educate us here on the show week in and week out, I hope. Welcome back, Tom.
Good to be back.
612-341-0980, 612-341-0980 to join this conversation, or tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll, or post your comments on Truth to Tell's Facebook page, facebook.com/Truth to Tell. Tom Legg, this is a pretty heady report you guys put together. Can you run down its primary findings in terms that listeners and viewers can get their arms around, get hold of?
Well, I guess there's really three parts to the report. First, we look at the numbers, just kind of review some of the inequality data for the United States, and then we compare that to Minnesota. The second part is really to look at the causes and impacts of inequality, and then finally we present a story about we allude to or speak of a new economic inequality impact statement, which would be similar to the environmental impact statements that have been in use since the early 1970s, maybe into the 60s. What we find is, in terms of Minnesota, has lower income inequality, lower poverty, and higher median income than the United States as a whole. But Minnesota's median income being the income of the family in the middle of the distribution. Half have lower income and half have higher income.
Whereas in other parts of the country, it's a little more off balance than that?
Well, I just want to say that our income, our median income in Minnesota has, for many years, been higher than the median income for the United States as a whole. However, we had the largest drop of any state from 2000 until 2009, and about 18%.
In median income?
In median family income.
The drop just went like this, I noticed,
right,
on a scale, and you've got that here. And by the way, we should tell even your competition, not your competition, but Growth and Justice's sort of colleague in competition is Minnesota 2020. And they actually wrote an article, Jeff Van Wyschen did, supporting your findings. So he said these are all sustainable after an analysis that they did. So this has quite the credibility, this economic inequality study. So go ahead, please.
Okay. And so our median income has been dropping faster, although it has increased. It increased in 2011, and we don't know what will have happened in 2012. The data for the United States for 2012 just came out last week, but the state level data has not come out. So that's median income. If we think about poverty levels, our poverty levels remain lower than that of the United States, but they have been rising, and not only rising in absolute terms, as have the U.S. poverty rates, but they've been rising relative to the rest of the economy, or relative to the rest of the states. So we've gone from, and I don't know if I'll find it here now, but from like 4th to 11th, that may not be exactly right, but 4th to 11th in poverty rates. And
I'm not sure that it matters where we have fallen relative to the rest of the country so much as what are we doing about a lot of this eventually. I mean, now what is the Gini coefficient? What is that?
a Gini coefficient is a measure of inequality across the income spectrum. Poverty rates look at the bottom, top income shares look at the top, and the Gini coefficient is an attempt to get at the overall level of inequality. And it's a number between 0 and 1. It would be 0 if everyone had the same amount of income. It would be 1 if one person had all of the income, and something in between is some inequality.
Okay.
Now, Minnesota's inequality or Gini coefficient is about 43, whereas the U.S. Gini coefficient is about 47.
And so the higher the number, the more inequality.
The more
there is.
inequality,
Yeah.
and it's not really proportional. There's a difference. There's a significant difference between 43 and 47. It's not
like,
proportional.
No,
It's
right.
not really a proportional
you have to take
number.
into account how the population levels too in the places that you're comparing, I would imagine.
Well, it does that automatically. It's just that the measure is not a proportional measure. All you can really say is that higher numbers reflect higher inequality. And so, just to give an example, if you look at the least unequal countries with the lowest Gini coefficients, which would be in Scandinavia,
Yes.
about 0.2,
Almost inevitably.
about 0.23, 0.25, 0.27.
Okay.
Europe, the continental Europe is in the 0.3 range. Britain, the UK accepted, which has higher inequality. And if you look at Canada, Canada and Japan are very similar to continental Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are in the 0.3 to 0.35 range, and
That's
the United
pretty low.
States is 0.47 right now, and Minnesota is about 0.43.
But what do those numbers tell you, and what does that mean? Are these ought to be red flags for somebody, right?
Right. Our Gini coefficient in the United States has risen from in the high 0.3s to 0.47, which is huge.
You're saying it's almost geometric as it goes up the scale.
Well, just to give you, the highest is in some of the countries in South America, which is about 0.55, and
Right.
So-
Where poverty is really like in Brazil and
Yeah.
some of the countries that.
and China's a little higher than ours.
Oh.
India's a little lower.
Yeah, I noticed that because China, to me, I know you're saying that this takes into account the difference in population, but it seems to me like the size of the country should matter. Like to me, just looking at it, intuitively, it seems like a smaller country with a smaller population would be somewhat easier to manage this inequality than in a country like the United States, especially because you're dealing with some significant state governments as well as federal government that are trying to regulate or deregulate this kind of thing. I mean, so when you look at China, I would think that would be right, that would, out of all the countries that I was seeing on these lists in the report, that we would be most similar to them. I mean, does that make sense, Tom?
Well, certainly the structure of the government would have a dramatic impact. So we have very powerful states here, and so it's much more difficult to manage things politically and manage the economy when you have powerful states and as well as diverse regions. China does have a top-down government, and so if they decided, they would probably have an easier time deciding to change the level of inequality and actually achieving it than we would. Now, I haven't thought a great deal about that, but I think that would be the case.
But Tom, now let's, and Brianna, maybe you can start chiming in. What have you been hearing among the laboring classes, as it were, about all this? Are people as upset as they ought to be?
I think when you talk to people at their door, which
This
is
is
what,
Brianna Halverson of the AFL-CIO. I'm sorry.
yeah, Working America, we're the community affiliate of the AFL-CIO. So we talk to people who don't have a union at their doors every night. And when you talk to people at their doors, I think, people don't immediately come up and say, hey, I'm tired and I'm making less than what I used to. But I think once you get into the conversation with people, they realize that their adult children are living with them still after going through college. And, just a generation ago when they went through college, that meant a better job. And that isn't the case. And I think when you look at reports from Growth and Justice as well as Minnesota 2020, you can see that, we should be excited about the recovery, but the recovery was really low-wage jobs, and that affects people coming into the workforce and leaving the workforce. If you've gotten laid off, we had some members of Working America who were unemployed and, struggled to find a job at the same income level. And so what they ended up doing after their unemployment ran out was get a job in low-wage work, right? So
there we go.
making about half of what they used to.
Yeah,
So.
and this is happening, right, again, exponentially across the country, and as the gap widens. And apparently we have a phone call.
We do. We have Daniel from Hopkins on the phone. Hello, Daniel. Good
Let's
morning.
go to the phones. Daniel.
Daniel, are you there? Have we lost Daniel? Oh,
He's
I guess.
gone.
Call us back, Daniel. Sorry about that.
Unfortunately, when we're in the middle of a conversation, sometimes it's hard to get to each phone call as soon as you might have us do that. So just give it a Tom O'Connell. Gosh, we have two Toms here. That's right. Both professors, no less. Tom O'Connell, why? Take a look at the observation in a social science context and talk about how we see that dynamic playing out in the larger policy world.
Well, I think that economic inequality itself is problematic for a lot of social reasons that we don't normally think about, starting with democracy itself. What is the impact of democracy when you have essentially a growing oligarchy, when you have so much concentration of wealth at the top and so many people throughout the rest of the economy who are feeling less powerless, less powerful, and actually experiencing in their pocketbooks less resources. So I think that concentration has huge implications politically, which we can talk about. I also think there's a whole bunch of other things that we normally don't think about, but in conversations at the door, it probably starts coming out. For example, health. There is a direct relationship between inequality and lower health outcomes. The U.S. is now 27th among developed nations in the world in terms of health outcomes, and we have gone up higher the more inequality we have. So inequality has an inverse relationship to health. Look at happiness, psychology. That's a little mini industry. People are always trying to measure happiness, and some psychologists are finding a relationship between happiness and inequality. The more unequal, the less happiness. And we can explore these more, but I just want to kind of put these out as
Well,
topics.
I'm glad you're laying it out a little bit. I mean, because there is a psychology behind this that has its ripple effects in public policy, as well as decision making on the part of the people who are essentially at the who are feeling that pinch, whose own personal incomes are real incomes are dropping, or their health care is being pulled away from them, out from under them.
Yeah. So let me talk about how these things begin to come together.
Yeah, please.
The psychology, the sociology, the politics, the economics.
Okay. Then we'll take a break.
Yeah. Okay. So really quickly, I know, Andy, you've been concerned. We've done a lot of programs on segregation.
Yes.
And we usually think about segregation in terms of racial segregation, not only in schools but in neighborhoods, the concentration of poverty that Myron Orfield and other people have talked about. But we are also experiencing a hyper-segregation of the wealthy. What happens when people's life experience, their neighbors, their relationships, are all within a kind of bubble of privilege.
Exactly.
And one of the things that happens is you lose empathy and connection with other people.
That's right.
And that then becomes, a huge social issue, and we're seeing that happen as well. Metro areas are becoming more and more segregated by income than they were even.
The growth
10,
of
15,
gated
20.
communities.
Yeah,
out
gated
on the
communities
edge.
is like a
Oh,
symbol.
my-
You don't have to have a gate, but that's a
Yeah.
symbol.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
just well, you want to take a break?
Well, let's take a break. We are talking about economic inequality, and we're starting now to get into the ripple effects of not just the data that have come out of this incredibly important report from Growth and Justice, of which Tom Legg has been a part as a researcher and co-author, but its effects on the working class folks, with Brianna Halverson here from Working America, and a part of the AFL-CIO, and Tom O'Connell, a professor emeritus at the Metropolitan State University. We are going to be delving into more now of how does this feel to you, and we're interested in how does that make you feel? How does that, if you hear about all this, the isolation of the upper classes is a very important structure as public policy discovered, because powerful people are sitting up there more and more removed from us.
And we can talk about how that fits into sort of the mainstream discourse that we hear around this
Every
issue
day
as
at the
well.
coffee shop. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember, you can join this conversation as well by giving us a call at 612-341-0980, 612-341-0980. You can also tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll, or post your comments on Truth to Tell's Facebook page. Stay with us. Truth to Tell will be right back. Right now, we will get back to our discussion on income inequality. I keep tripping up over that term. That would have been my third
Well,
time.
we've got
So-
economic inequality.
Yes,
We have
are talking
economic
about
inequities. Yeah.
economic inequality, and how big of a deal that actually is. And we want to know how big of a deal you think that actually is. Should we try to, as we get called Nazis or socialists, should we try to redistribute some wealth? How would we do that? And how big of a deal do you think it actually is? We want to know what you think. Give us a call at 612-341-0980, 612-341-0980. You can also, if you're online, just tab over and tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll, or post your questions and comments on Truth to Tell's Facebook page. And we'll get back to our conversation right now.
Where should we pick it up? So, Tom, you were sort of talking about bringing some of these together, all these elements together, and some of the effects it has on public policy. Then we talked during the break about Thomas Legg, how we need to talk about the detrimental effect it actually has on the economy overall. So we want to get to that, and of course, once again, our folks out there, the working class folks who are actually feeling all of this. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I think I'm going to throw a forward pass back to Tom Legg. And to me, what's so exciting as I read reports like Growth and Justice and talk to some of my fellow, I'm not an economist, but economists, is there seems to be a different kind of economic discussion. It used to be, at least in my poor knowledge of it, that a lot of economists were arguing that, inequality in and of itself is not such a bad thing. You're saying, or this report is saying, yes, it's got to the point where it's bad economics. Even if we didn't care about anybody, it's bad economics. It's leading to undercutting growth. Is that right?
I came at this topic from the point of view that it's simply unfair whether it has any effect on the economy or not.
Yeah.
And as I looked into it further and further, as we looked into it further and further, we started to realize that even if you forget about the fairness issue and just think about the effect on the economy, as there's a lot of data to show that those countries or those parts of the United States that are least unequal are growing more quickly than those parts that are most unequal. And that's been historically true due to, as a result of a study done from 79 to 99, and it was pretty clear in that study. And then if you think about just intuitively, as you hollow out the middle class, the engine for growth is just goes away. A person that used to make what the old auto workers made $28 an hour, the new ones make roughly 15. That new auto worker at $15 an hour can't buy the Chevrolet that they produce. They can't. They're not out buying new
That goes
appliances.
against what Henry Ford said. If you don't pay them enough for them to buy the car that they're
his
actually
Fords, right,
producing, his own Fords, he said, that's ridiculous. So he saw the real need for adequate living wages among his own workers in that case.
Well,
yes.
and speaking of inequality, Tom Legg, you mentioned in the report that there was a poll that was done of 3 different scenarios, one of which being what it actually is now, where what is it, something like 80% of the income is in the top 1%, or something. What am I? Am I getting that right?
The study you're referring to that we just quoted, we did not do,
Yeah.
is really about wealth inequality. They
Yeah.
chose to use wealth, which is much more unequal in the United States than income inequality. It's just,
Partly because of investments
Well-
and the taxation of them and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
well, and the cumulative effects of
Yeah.
the same people being many of the same people being in the top income earners over the years, they accumulate a lot of wealth.
Right.
Yeah,
And
essentially just stuffing it under the mattress and not doing not
giving it to
not
their kids.
literally, but the investment back into the community that's supposedly supposed to happen, according to some economists, is not necessarily happening that way. But the point being that when we were talking about inequality and whether things should be totally even, in this poll, in these scenarios, there was a scenario where everybody had an equal 20% share. There was one where it was the way it actually exists today, which is very disparate compared to distribution of wealth. And then there was one where there were some pockets that had a little bit more, but there was never more than 35% for each. Was it divided into fifths? So it was like 20% by 20% by 20%.
Well, just
Go
to
ahead,
maybe
Tom.
put a perspective on that, the in the U.S. the 84% of the wealth belongs to the top 20%.
Yeah.
Top or to people, the richest 20%. The second distribution had 36% going to the top 20%, and the third distribution had equal shares. And the people, they asked folks where, assuming that you didn't know how rich or how poor you would be, which economy would you like to live in? Which would you like to be born into? And most of the people chose the one with some inequality. That was the most popular. The least popular was the actual distribution. They were not told that it was the actual U.S. distribution. The least popular was that. And then there was some popularity for the equal distribution, being born into a world with equal distribution. And so this was their evidence that people would not choose to live in a world with as much inequality of wealth as we have. Then they went on to ask folks, what do you think the inequality is in the United States? And the average of their estimates was far less inequality than we actually have. And then they went on to ask them, how much would you like to have? And it was even less than what they thought existed.
Well, that's what I was trying to get across in our opening statement this morning, because there's sort of a self-deception going on among some of the folks, especially in the middle class, who think they're part of the top 20% when they're not anywhere near that.
Right.
And so I think that speaks to the idea that a lot of people do want some level of inequality, as we'll call
Or
it.
just
as you point
expect
out in
it.
the
Maybe
report.
they say
they expect there to be some level of inequality to drive competition, to drive this whole free market, as we call it, the supply and demand chain. There needs to be some incentive to want to do better, but that that the point that we've gotten to now is what Tom O'Connell was saying, is that we've got these people that are so rich, they've got so much capital, they aren't necessarily taking it all and investing it back into the economy to try to boost.
On the contrary, they try to avoid that.
Yeah. So as we were saying, they're sort of stuffing it into the mattress,
Yeah.
you know, and not doing anything with it, and then they're becoming more and more out of touch with the people at the bottom and their struggles, and as you said, that gets to the point where we no longer see the kind of growth we need to.
So,
support
Brianna,
large-
have you detected some of this sort of self-deception in among the labor union members, the rank and file, and how the fact that they're losing ground isn't either sinking in, or they're seeing those that are not losing ground as the enemy rather than let's say the very wealthy at the top. I mean, there's a lot of segregation coming through the middle class because of that psychological effect of trying to feel as though you're making it when it's not really happening.
Yeah, I think union members, the active ones, have a pretty good understanding that that there's a change, right? And I think even rank and file have an understanding that there's a change, partly because of a lot of the lockouts we've been seeing with musicians, the crystal sugar workers, and even in the past 10 years, like there have been, AFSCME's been on strike at the university, but also at the state of Minnesota. I mean, so there's been, some changes where it's been more difficult to go through, negotiations. But also, I would say non-union members who we talk to primarily on the doors, I wouldn't say are able to verbalize as much as a union member, but are able to talk about it in real-world experiences. Like I said earlier, that their kids are living at home with them, that they aren't making as much. I would also point out that we are also have an erosion of the amount of time that people spend at work. And also how much time that they spend in their cars, because they need to live in certain areas where it's more affordable for them to live, but they need to drive farther and farther to find a higher paying job. And I would also point out that you sent a promo for us to watch about a new documentary that's coming out by Robert Reich. And one of the statements was, a chef said, I make about $55,000 a year, which at the first you hear, oh, well, that's a good living. But then he said, I work 70 hours a week, right? And so you think to yourself, how does that affect our society? As, Professor O'Connell was saying, like, how are people able to be a part of their democracy when they are literally working every waking moment? And how does that affect our family life?
Yes.
And so, what are we doing, and how are we using reports like what Growth and Justice did to take that to guide our policy, to change it in a way where we're not only affecting people's wages, but we're affecting people's work life. We're affecting the fact that they can depend on a 40-hour work week.
And family life,
And
just
family
because of all that too. I mean,
mean,
they're being taken away from their families.
Yeah,
and-
thinking about the ripple effects.
oh yeah.
Can you
and
get
some of them have to have
yeah.
three jobs, mind you.
and
They're
just look at
working
what-
70 hours a week, not just in one job.
Just look what McDonald's put out about their wages. They said, yep, you can live, you just have to budget correctly. And so there's this shaming that they do to the worker,
Yes.
that you just aren't budgeting correctly. When no, really, McDonald's and Walmart and these corporations aren't paying people enough, and they aren't giving people enough quality of life where they can actually work and live.
Let's go to the phones.
We do. We have Jeff from Minneapolis on the line. Good morning, Jeff.
Hi.
Hello, Jeff.
Jeff, thanks for calling.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
It's a great discussion you're having. And I had...
Are you Jeff Van Wyken?
I'm sorry?
Are you Jeff Van Wyken?
No,
No,
Jeff
okay.
Moore. No.
Okay, no, okay, just checking. I did invite Jeff Van Wyken to call in. So, all right, go ahead.
Well, there are kind of two data points that I see that could add a sort of different dimension to the discussion. One is I'm unemployed and I'm in debt. And every day, or virtually every day, I get a credit card in the mail
Yeah.
from the 1% who would like to indebt me further.
Well, exactly.
And the other data point is that with this NSA, this sort of tapping everybody's email and phone and movements and internet and all that kind of thing all the time, it's also that they must see us or me and as some kind of potential enemy or something where I've got to be tracked all the time too, besides being in debt. And so I think it goes beyond the idea that it's just inequality. It's also, I perceive it as dangerous, the kind of economy that we have. It's just to have people have it so unequal, and there has to be some mechanism to control that inequality or to keep it in place.
Yeah, that's a great,
Very
great point.
good. Jeff, thank you very much. It's an important point.
So
Well,
let
you
me.
got a good discussion.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
calling
Tom
me.
O'Connell.
So I think that is a good segue into the sort of politics about this. You would think, as inequality grows, and I do think the Occupy Wall Street and the 1% did, at least for a time, and hopefully continues to build some awareness that the country's getting to be more unequal, and that's a problem. You would think then that as the majority of people understand that they're headed in one direction toward the bottom, and a smaller and smaller group of people are the wealthy, that would breed a condition of revolt.
Yeah, exactly.
Class consciousness, for example, that hasn't been a real strong suit of the American experience, except in certain times. That, in turn, is what the caller suggests, may create a situation where the rich actually begin to feel under siege. And then you get a really volatile political situation, such as you have in nations, some of them in Latin America and other places, where inequality is so high. You have not only gated communities, but you have kind of a barricaded society.
Well, it's a little like the slave owners developing a
Yeah.
hate for the slaves, the fear of the slaves. Yeah. Go ahead.
And wanting us to keep it, or wanting, I shouldn't say us, but I definitely consider myself in that lower percentile.
Right.
But wanting to keep the slaves sort of uneducated of their situation too was the other part
Exactly.
of
Well,
that.
yeah.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
So, where am I going with this? So I'm thinking that one of the things, the kind of last bastion of working class wage earning power and is the union movement, and that is the big target number one of many folks.
Huge.
And it's the one institution that actually can organize working people and put some real money on the table for elections. And it's not an equalizer, but at least it's in the game. So I think organizing the unorganized is very important, and continuing to support a dwindling labor movement as well.
And this does require all of us as citizens to engage in public policy discussions and get to the damn polls and vote for your
Well, it's that and
leadership. And
it's about discussion, and it's about rebuilding community and connections between people, because ultimately you would think that people would get angry and figure out and rise up, but in fact inequality not only can create conditions of greater awareness and solidarity, it is more likely over a long period of time to create conditions of hopelessness and disconnection.
Yes, and
that
a
is
lack
what-
of focus.
Right.
Yeah, this
So
is what
building
the
a
others-
sense of community, building organizations is really about building hope and a sense of power that gets undermined every day by growing inequality. And that's really the job ahead. It's about knowledge. It's about relationships, whether it's in the door or in the church basement. It's about social power. So that-
Okay.
yeah.
Might I add, or just weigh in on this discussion? I think there's one section of our report actually deals with the possibility of political action to reduce inequality. The story in the United States has generally been that increasing inequality has been largely a result of technological change and globalization. And,
Yes.
And
Inevitable, so to
and
speak.
so it's inevitable, right? It's inevitable, and it
Yeah.
has nothing to do with politics, and politics can't correct it. But what we've done is taken a look at some of the other countries, other developed countries, and as we pointed out earlier, there's less inequality. But so Canada, Europe, Japan have all faced the same technological forces, the same globalization forces, and yet their inequality, while it has gone up a bit, has not gone up anywhere to the extent that we have here, that it has here. And one of the factors there, I think, is that their labor laws have remained much more conducive to unions and conducive to worker organizations. And the United States has gone down, and then
It's
we
been
have
a real
political
quest to get rid of unions here.
political environment that was demonstrated last week with the food stamp
Right.
law.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So I just want to mention a couple of comments. Thanks to those who left these with us. Kel Heil asked, "Why does the right wing celebrate inequality?" I think we talked about that a little bit.
Well, but celebrating inequality or dismissing it as anything except, all right, this is the natural order of things, and it grows out of a distrust for the common class, and even if they're members of it. And so what do you think, Tom?
Well, two things, and I think the report that Growth and Justice did mention somewhere in there that there's a kind of inequality denial similar to climate change denial.
Exactly,
and you can always get economists to kind of give their studies and the rest of it. So part of it's just not seeing the reality, I think.
Well,
But the other part is
Yeah.
it's a cherished notion in the American culture, deeply held, that each of us as individuals is responsible. We can rise as far as we want if we only work hard enough and keep government out of our path.
Yes.
And what we're seeing now is that the inequality's got to the point where actually it's a problem in itself, that equality of opportunity is being undermined by inequality.
That's it.
Well-
That's a very key issue.
yeah, the point is that inequality in itself is not intrinsically bad. It's that you can cross a certain threshold to where it is bad.
It's
is the
funny,
point
some
that
of
you're
us
trying
think
to
that
make.
inequality as such is not it's something that is absolutely essential. Before we go too far, because we're running out of time already, Doug. What is this economic inequality impact assessment? What this EIIA that is recommended by the report? Tom Legg?
Well, this would be a requirement that bills that would affect income inequality or the equality of income, or have different impacts on different strata of the population defined by income, would require an assessment of their impact on the distribution of income.
Okay.
And it would be similar to the idea came from the idea of environmental impact statements. And we have not fleshed it out to any great degree, but you can imagine some simple things like how would it affect the level of poverty? To what extent would the benefits of the law go to the top 5% or the top 10% or the top 1%? Or what effect might it have on the Gini coefficient? So you can imagine things that we could do. We have not fleshed it out. We have discussed it with some state officials, and there's been some interest. But we have not really fleshed it out completely.
Brianna, where to from here for you guys?
Well, for us, like I said, we have 250,000 members here in the state, and they're all people who don't have the benefit of a union. And so for us, it's about giving them opportunities to come together in community and fight for policies that will change their lives. And we're also hoping to raise the minimum wage, work on policies that could help affect their schedule, but also giving them tools where they can, affect their work life. We've got a website called fixmyjob.com where they can type
Just
in.
about to ask you.
Where they can type in some of the issues that they're affecting at their workplace and get some real solutions that they can do to actually change their work life and hopefully create a community at their workplace. And then if you care about working issues and you don't have a union, you can join the labor movement just by joining Working America at workingamerica.org.
Oh, great. And Tom, one more, a final question, answer for me. But I am interested in how do we deal with the psychology of this in the social science world? How do you deal with the people who have lost hope and can't focus on their increasing poverty circumstances? How do we do that?
I think supporting people in realizing they're not alone, in bringing people together, that what they're experiencing is not a private, personal trouble. C. Wright Mills has this great phrase called the sociological imagination, and it is the ability to see oneself in the context of one's time and see the connections that are there. So if I'm sitting there in isolation thinking, boy, I'm kind of worthless, I'm either not working or working 3 jobs and I can't, get ahead, That is a kind of isolated, despairing situation. But when you bring people together and you share stories and you find out, hey, this is not just my problem, it's our problem. And therefore, together, maybe we can support each other. It might be simply mutual help just to get by, like a lot of working class communities have had to do over the years. But it can also be political action around shared agendas to make it better. So I don't know that social scientists have a better psychological frame of mind than anybody else, but that's how we look at change.
Tom, looks like you'd like to.
Well, I just wanted
Final word.
to draw attention to the fact that we're working on another piece that will look at inequality within Minnesota on a county level basis. And our preliminary data shows that inequality, all measures, are much lower in the suburbs, the Twin Cities suburbs, almost to the degree of more like Canada.
Oh.
And the rest of the state is much more unequal. And we're going to be up. That data is a little old right now. We're going to be updating it, and we're going to be hopefully publishing that early next year.
All right, so we'll try to keep up with this discussion a little bit later, and we must end it there, I'm afraid. Thank you very much to Professor Thomas Legg of the Carlson School and a researcher co-author of the Growth and Justice Report, Widening Economic Inequality. I did it now. Inequality in Minnesota, Causes, Effects, and a Proposal for Estimating its Impact on Policymaking. Professor Legg, thank you once more.
Thank you.
We also had with us Brianna Halverson, who's the director of the Minnesota branch of Working America and AFL-CIO program. Ms. Halverson, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Brianna. And once more, thanks to you, Tom O'Connell. Tom is Professor Emeritus of Political Science Studies at Metropolitan State University. And we'll see you around, friend. Congratulations once again on your wonderful retirement. There was that wonderful little gathering yesterday. Is there any doubt of the danger of the terrible inequality and income disparity all around us is doing to the very fabric of this state and this nation? Can there be any question that we must recognize it for what it is and to fight to restore some equilibrium in the culture? It's up to us, folks, all of us. Once more next week, we talk theater and arts as politics.
And TruthToTell will be back, next week. I'm excited for that conversation. We're a co-production of Civic Media Minnesota and KFAI. Links to audio and video archives of all of our past shows are up on TruthToTell's own website, truthtotell.org, as well as kfai.org.
Thanks to our crew, engineer Mark Kerner, videographer Craig Stelmacher, and our production assistant Emily Krumberger, who is a new face around here. We love having her around. Thank you, Emily.
Yes, thank you, Emily. And join us again next week for another edition of Truth to Tell. Until then, I'm Michelle Ali-Murati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll. And as always, remember, we'll see you next week. And do take care of each other.